Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. As you can tell from the title, in today's video we are going to be testing out another dupe of the Jeffree Star Blood Sugar palette. This time it's going to be from Revolution, but instead of the Reloaded line, it's going to be from the I Heart Revolution section, where you have all of the chocolate bar palettes. And even though this is not a two-faced chocolate bar dupe, it still has that same chocolate bar palette packaging. The palette itself is called Red Velvet, and very similarly to the Blood Sugar palette, it has a red base with white chocolate on it. As you can see, you get 18 shades inside, and whilst that is exactly the same number as you get in the Blood Sugar palette, these are not exactly the same shades. So whilst the Red Alert palette was a very similar dupe, this one is more of just like inspired by the Blood Sugar palette. You have shades missing and you have shades added in here that are not in the original palette. Without going any further, I'm gonna already insert the swatches for you to show you what I'm talking about. As usual, you have the original Blood Sugar palette on the bottom and the Red Velvet palette on the top. As you can see, you get shades that are not in the Red Velvet palette and you get shades that are not in the Blood Sugar palette. So this is definitely the same color theme, but not exactly the same colors as the Blood Sugar palette. Nevertheless, in today's eye makeup look, I created one of the eyes using the Red Velvet palette, and that eye is this one. I think they turned out extremely similar. So you are able to get very similar looks, even if not identical. I feel like if I was wearing just one of these palettes, really no one could tell that it wasn't the Blood Sugar palette. So yeah, I do feel like this is a really nice dupe. It's obviously more expensive than the Reloaded line. That palette was £5. This palette is £9. Just in comparison, the original Jeffree Star Blood Sugar palette is £52. So the Red Velvet palette is, even though it's not as cheap as the Red Alert palette, it's still almost 6 times cheaper than the original one. Like I said before, they both have 18 shades inside, but whilst the Red Velvet palette contains 1 gram of product in each pan, the Jeffree Star Blood Sugar palette contains 1.5 grams of product in each pan. So this is one of those very few times when you actually get more product in the original palette. The reason for that is because Jeffree is normally very generous with the amount of product you get in each pan. Just to put that in perspective, Anastasia Beverly Hills' eyeshadow pans are half the size. So yeah, 1.5 gram in a pan is really generous, but I would say 1 gram is not bad either. The Revolution palette was made in China, whilst the Blood Sugar palette was made in the USA, and both eyeshadow palettes have 12 months shelf life. And one more thing to mention, they both claim to be cruelty-free, which I believe means that Revolution doesn't sell their products in China. Revolution is a UK-based brand, so here in the UK they are available basically wherever you go. I know in the USA they are mainly available in TJ Maxx and I believe now in Ulta, but I'm not 100%. I don't know how much they're available anywhere else on the world. I know they are available in Poland. They are actually quite big in Poland, but I have no idea about China. They are probably not available because if they were, they wouldn't be able to pull off being cruelty-free. So once again, if you look at my eyes, they look really similar to each other, and I really had no problem applying the Revolution shades at all. I feel like this is a really good quality eyeshadow palette. However, I just really don't know if I can justify spending twice as much on this palette as I could on the Reloaded Red Alert palette, which is £5 and it has really good performance. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this palette. I just feel like the other one is cheaper and you get more similar shades to the original one. So if I'm looking at this palette, not considering anything else, I think it is a really nice palette. However, I just can't justify the £9 price. I think that's quite a high price for a drugstore palette. I just really don't know if it's worth spending that extra money on it. Of course, because it is a chocolate bar palette, it does smell like chocolate, which is really, really nice. However, I believe it's also the reason why the shades are so hardly pressed and they all seem to be quite smooth to the touch, meaning that even the matte shades will have less grip to them than the Blood Sugar palette does, and that makes it harder to build up the shade on top of itself. And almost all of the shades have a certain sheen to them, and they are a bit harder sometimes to get out of the pan than the Blood Sugar palette is. So whilst having that chocolate scent to it is a nice thing, I don't necessarily think that it helps the performance of the palette. And quite honestly, I am gravitating more towards the Red Alert palette just because it's such a great dupe. You will see in the video when I was creating this eye makeup look, I had to swatch quite a few different brown shades to find which one I should be working with. For the shade that is in the crease, I had to mix two different shades together, and as you can see, the shimmery shade is slightly more orange on the dupe side. So with this palette it's a bit harder to find the shades that are in the Blood Sugar palette. It's definitely more work than the Red Alert palette. So like I said, that just makes me question why would you spend that extra money on it. But it is a very good quality palette and it smells amazing. I love Too Faced for their scented products, so I'm quite a sucker for that. I just feel like it makes makeup feel more luxurious, so I'm definitely up for that. I just don't know if I'm up for the price, but nevertheless, this is today's eye makeup look. We're gonna go and jump right into creating it, and once we're finished, I'm gonna tell you my final thoughts about these two palettes, and I will tell you which one I think you should pick up. Alright, so as always, I'm gonna be using the cheaper palette on this side of the face, which is today going to be the I Heart Revolution Red Velvet palette, and the more expensive palette on this side of the face, which is today going to be the Jeffree Star Blood Sugar palette. I'm gonna add just a little bit of concealer on both eyelids to make it sticky again. We don't have exactly the same shades in the two palettes. The Blood Sugar palette was more of an inspiration for the Red Velvet palette than an actual source of shades. So I am gonna do my best to try and recreate the same thing on both sides, but we might get slight differences. Nevertheless, some of the shades are almost identical, and like I said before, others are completely missing or replaced by something else. But as far as the darker brown and the red shades go, you pretty much get the same. So I'm gonna be doing a quite red and bronzy eye makeup look to make sure we are able to recreate the same on both sides and give a fair chance to the Red Velvet palette. On the Blood Sugar side, I'm gonna first start with Cherry Soda in the crease, just a very, very light application to put down the base of the color. So once again, I only pick up a really small amount of the product. First kind of tap it on and then start blending it out. Don't blend it out too much because we want it to stay in this area. This is why it's good that the eyelid was sticky from the concealer, because this way it's gonna keep the eyeshadow in this area. It's not going to spread out as much as it would have if it was on a more powdery, less sticky base. And now I'm gonna take some more of Cherry Soda, but now on a smaller brush, because I want to make sure that the color goes exactly where I want it to go, and I feel like on a smaller brush you have more control. So I applied it exactly in the crease and on the outer V. And then I'll take my previous brush again to blend it. And then I just take a little bit more. Alright, so that's enough of cherry soda for now. Now we're gonna jump into the red velvet palette and try to recreate this. So I initially thought that my best option would be to go with Patisserie, but that shade is a lot less pink. That's more like an orangey red color. So instead of just using this on its own, I'm gonna mix in some of Infinite. This one is more of like a magenta or fuchsia shade, so I don't want to use too much of it because this is clearly not a magenta color, it's more like a hot pink. But I'm gonna add just a hint of it to this shade to kind of get the same results. So again, I'm gonna start with some of Patisserie on this blending brush and just kind of tap it on and apply it to the crease. It's definitely not as pigmented as the other one with the Jeffree Star palette. I just had to pat it on once and then blend it out. With the red velvet palette, I already went back 3 times, and this is how much color payoff I got so far. So you definitely need to work with this a bit more to build up the color, but the good news is that it does seem to be buildable. Remember, this line is more expensive than the one we tested out before from Revolution. That was the reloaded line of the normal Revolution collection, and that costs £4 or £5 depending on which reloaded palette you pick up. These palettes, these chocolate bar palettes, cost £9, however, so they're more than double. So I would expect more than double of the performance as well from these shades in order to be able to justify why it costs twice as much. So far, I'm not sure if I'm getting that. I need to see if these shades are really buildable. So far, I got a quite nice coverage from this shade, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to darken it up in certain areas or not, and I feel like that sets apart a good eyeshadow palette from a cheap drugstore one. Yeah, so far it doesn't really seem to be able to build any further than that. I'm sure you can see what I'm talking about here. I'm gonna dip my brush into the shade Infuse now, and I'm gonna try to turn this into a more of a hot pink shade, because right now it's more of like a rusty red color. So let's see if that helps. Yeah, I feel like the combination of the two is definitely a lot more similar to the original Cherry Soda shade, but I still don't get that detailed look that I did on the Jeffree Star side. So it's definitely not looking the same whatsoever. I believe that's gonna be fixed once we apply some concealer to create the cut crease, but obviously you might not want to use a concealer or create a cut crease. You might just want to work with this shade on its own, and so far the Blood Sugar palette is definitely a winner here. So I just went off camera for a second and I was looking for a shade that I could use to really darken up the crease area, a dark brown or a dark burgundy shade, and unfortunately there's nothing really similar to Extraction or Coma in the Red Velvet palette, so we won't be able to use those. I am contemplating to use the shade Intravenous, which is a dark chocolate brown shade, but it might not be dark enough, or it might not go well with the look we have so far. As you can see, we have a hot pink color on the lid so far, and I don't know if brown is necessarily the best shade to use with pink. So I'm really not sure what to do here. The best thing I could find was a shade really similar to Blood Sugar. However, Blood Sugar is a quite velvety shade. It's not matte, and I don't know if that's the best to use on the lid. So I think I will probably just go with the brown and see how that works out. We only want to use a little bit because we just want to really emphasize the crease, make it really dark there. And after that we're gonna cut the crease and use a different shade on the lid. So yeah, I'm gonna use this brown shade now, and I'm using the same pencil brush I used before. And once I apply the color, I blend it out with the same blending brush I used before. Alright, I think this might just work actually. Alright, but I feel like that brown shade worked out just fine, so we're gonna try to recreate that on the red velvet side now. This is the brown shade from the Jeffree Star palette once again, and we have a couple of different dark brown shades in this red velvet palette, so I'm gonna try to swatch them next to it to see which one is the best match. We're gonna first swatch Bitter. I think Bitter might be darker and cooler toned. It's actually quite similar, it just has a bit more purple in it. Next, let's see Chocolate. I personally thought first that Chocolate is gonna be the most similar, but it might be a bit too light. I still feel like as far as the shade goes, Chocolate is more similar. I'm not gonna swatch Lush because Lush is a dark brown shade, but it's shimmery, so that's not gonna be an option. The last brown shade we have here is called Baked, but I'm pretty sure this is too light. I'm gonna swatch it anyway, but it's definitely a lot lighter. Yeah, that's too light. So just like I originally thought I would, I'm gonna be using Chocolate, and if it's not dark enough, then I'm gonna add a little bit of Bitter. So let's see, Chocolate. I haven't had any fallout from this red velvet palette yet, which is quite good. Okay, I definitely want that brown to be a bit darker than that, so I'm gonna add a little bit of Bitter into this. Just mix it in with the Chocolate shade and then blend it out. Okay, this is looking a lot better now than before. Probably because we are using a different shade to darken up certain areas instead of expecting the same shade to layer on top of itself. So this is so far. Right now I'm really impressed with this. I feel like they are basically identical at the moment. I'm gonna go off camera and I'm gonna prepare my cut crease. Once I'm done, I'm gonna be back and then we apply the next shade. Alright, so as you guys can see, the cut crease is done. I don't know if this is my best application ever, probably not, but let's just move on. So the shimmery shade we're gonna be applying all over this is gonna be Sweetener. They have an exact dupe for both of the gold shades from this palette, in the red velvet palette, so you can basically go with whatever you want, but I feel like this gold shade just suits today's look a lot better. I'm gonna start applying it with my finger and then use a brush after. in the Red Velvet palette. This shade is called Decadent, and I would say that this shade is looking slightly darker, at least in the pan. Hoping it's gonna look identical on the eye. I feel like it's a bit more orangey as well. The Blood Sugar version is more of a pink gold shade. This one has definitely more orange in it. And yeah, it's definitely darker. So it's very, very similar, but not identical. On the other hand, it's a lot more shimmery than the original one. I have some fallout on my face, especially on the Red Velvet side, but I'm gonna clean that up after we finished the eyeshadow look, so don't worry about that for now. I'm gonna take my original pencil brush and I'm gonna take some more of cherry soda again and just kind of transition the dark brown shade into the shimmery shade using cherry soda. Okay, now once again, let's try to repeat the same thing on the Red Velvet side. Once again, we don't have a shade exactly matching cherry soda, so we're gonna be mixing the two. First, I'm taking the shade Patisserie. And then some Infuse on top of that. Alright, as far as I'm concerned, the eyeshadow look is done. I'm gonna go off camera, clean up under my eyes, apply some eyeliner, mascara and some white eye pencil. And once I'm done, I'm gonna be back to show you the finished look and to tell you my final thoughts. Alright, so once again, here's the finished look. I think they look really, really similar. I would say that the only difference is that the shimmery shade on the lid looks more orange and slightly darker on the Red Velvet side. But other than that, I mean, come on, no one could tell that these are two different eyeshadow palettes or that this one is a hell of a lot cheaper than the other one. I think this is a great dupe. Maybe not as good as the previous one. I was really happy with the reloaded dupe. I was really happy with the performance, definitely the price point, and I was really happy that you got almost all of the colors in that palette exactly the same as the Blood Sugar palette. Once again, in that palette you had 15 shades. In the original palette you have 18, so obviously 3 shades were missing. But other than that, you pretty much got the same thing. Once again, this palette was more of just like inspired by the Blood Sugar palette. A lot of the shades are very, very similar, as clearly you can tell from my eye makeup look. But some of the shades are completely missing or replaced by something else. You do still get 18 shades in this one, just like in the original palette, but they are not the same 18 shades. However, I feel like you will be able to recreate 99% of the looks that you could get from the Blood Sugar palette. Once again, I experience the same issue I almost always get with the dupe palettes, which is that the application is not as sharp and crispy and controlled, and you are not able to build on top of the shade itself. So you don't have lighter and darker areas, which will result in a less precise and less detailed application. But at the end of the day, once you complete the eye makeup look, you can hardly even tell the difference. So yeah, if you see this eyeshadow palette in the store and you feel like you want to test out something similar to the Blood Sugar palette, it's definitely a great option. I will still go with the reloaded version, but this one is really nice if you enjoy the smell of chocolate. That's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because I would love to have you here. And until next time, take care of yourself. I will see you very soon. Bye.